So now I have the honor of presenting the last keynote at Umbraco Codegarden. We have Scott Hanselman from Microsoft joining us via the online stream. Take it away, Scott.
Hello, friends. How are you? Woo! One person. Woo! That was exactly what I needed. Thank you for that energy. I appreciate it, everybody. Hi, it's 7 in the morning here, and I'm very excited to do the ending keynote or the lock note, as we say, as we close up the couple of days here. I wish I could be there with you, perhaps next year. Right off the bat, I put together these slides, and I was told that having Comic Sans as your font is unprofessional. So already I failed here at Umbraco, so I changed my font to be more professional. But then I was told having a white background with the black is not very nice. So I went and I got some clip art, some evocative clip art like this, which I think looks pretty good. And that's basically what a developer's desk looks like. And someone told me that this is what a real developer's desk looks like. And I was like, that's not a nice way to, a real developer? Most developers don't have a neat, clean desk like that. So I had to find a picture of a real developer's desk. So I found this one, and it seems to me like that's really representative of what a real developer is. But in fact, we have to catch ourselves. We have to catch ourselves when we say real developer, because anybody who's making a solution with technology is a real developer, no matter what they're doing. So whether your desk looks like this or your desk looks like this, it doesn't matter, because we're all real developers and we all want everyone to feel welcome. I wore my Include Everyone t-shirt today, and I know that everyone at Umbraco is excited that everyone feel welcome in tech. Now, let's talk about attitude and style as we find ourselves on our journey in tech. Some of us may be earlier into tech, 5 to 10 years. For me, this year has been my 30th year. In fact, April 2022, I've been doing tech now for 30 years and 2 months. And a lot of times when I started out and when I work with people, it's a little intense. I kind of feel like it's a lot of this. It's just like, do it, yeah. And it's like hustle culture. And I've never done very well with that. I've always felt like that was not positive and not motivating for me. So instead, I'm reminded of this magazine from March of 1984. This magazine has this young lady on the front who's got her bubble gum and her pigtails, and she's programming on this TI-99. And that always made me feel welcome, because anybody can be on a machine, on a PC, working on whatever makes them happy. And we hear a lot about inclusion, and I know that the folks in Umbraco feel really strongly about this. We hear this term that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. That's an okay quote, but a better quote, a better version of that is inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. We always talk about people wanting a seat at the table, but we don't think about who actually built the table. And that's what's great about tech, is that we build the table and we can make things like whatever we want them to look like. So inclusion can take many forms. I like to think about inclusion as just literally being the opposite of exclusion. If you're excluding something, if you're making it unavailable to someone, then they are no longer included. And that's why it's so important to include everyone. We hear a lot about gender and color, but there are other invisible disabilities and invisible things that can prevent people from being successful in tech. You may know that I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I wear a number of medical implants, an insulin pump, and a sensor. I even went and made an Xbox avatar with a Dexcom blood sugar system built into it. And you may know me from my YouTubes, where I put together my cool prompt. And in my prompt here, which is run by Windows Terminal, you may note that I have my current folder. I have the version of .NET that I'm running, my current Git branch, and my blood sugar. Because I think that the two most important things in my life are the branch that I'm on in Git and my blood sugar that's happening right now. And all of that appears directly in my prompt. And that small thing is a way of tech including me and making me successful while I'm trying to do my work. And this is super important. Now, this analogy here, some people like this, some people don't. There's this thing called the technology priesthood. And when we say priesthood, we're not trying to put down religion, but what we're saying is there was a time when only the priests could read, and they would have the book, and then they would take the book down from on high, and they would bring it down to the people, and they'd say, "Don't touch it, just look. Don't, you can't." And then they would read it to you, but you couldn't read. This was the way tech was for a while. This idea that the knowledge is being hoarded and only the fancy people know how to do computers. This is a problem. I think we've all been to family events or holidays, and then you end up being tech support for your family, and then your family member says, "Oh, I'm not a technology computer person, but since I've got you here at Christmas, could you maybe run Windows Update? Could you go and fix my printer?" And the next thing you know, you're tech support for the whole family. And somehow we've set it up so the family and the non-computer people have split the world in half. There's tech people and there's non-tech people. And they think that they hurt the computer. My dad said, "I think I broke the computer." And it's interesting, the language that he's using. He thinks he broke the computer. He doesn't think about the UX designer or the programmer who's preventing him from being successful, or the thing that we did as a community to make computers hard. He thinks it's his fault. Now, this quote here says, "Experts in a field rarely want people to understand what they do." That's the kind of thing that you would think was written in 2022, but in fact was written in 1974. So this has been a problem in tech for a very, very long time. Now, this can be called gatekeeping. And gatekeeping is when you have a gate and you're going to stand in front of that gate and you're going to prevent people from coming in. And gatekeepers are folks at a high level. They're the decision makers who decide how information flows through a system. And sometimes these biases are, are built into the system, and sometimes those biases are people. And I realized as I started to think about my 30 years in tech, what was my personal bias? And I realized that my bias was primarily uh, against young people. The older I get, the more I think to myself, you can't trust anyone under 30. Some people may be biased towards particular demographics, but the older I get, the more I become an old man who shakes my fist at the cloud. And I think about, these young people, they don't know what they're doing. And then I realize that that's just because their experiences are different. And I started realizing when I spend more time with young people, they have fresh ideas, new ideas about technology, and they have totally different experiences. And it's unreasonable for me, as a person who's been in tech for so long, to expect them to care about Super Nintendo and Commodore 64 and my experiences, because their experiences are Oculus VR and iPhones and Android, and that's okay. So I just want to work with people that have positive energy and that they put out good work and they're sharing their experiences, because the thing that's most important for us to remember is that your experience is yours. It is unique. It is purely yours. So sometimes people will say, "Well, I don't know what I should blog about or YouTube about or talk about." You should talk about yourself. You should talk about your experience, because it is uniquely yours. And I've been trying to do that as much as I can on the internet for a very, very long time. I'll go and show you. If I go to hanselman.com, which is my personal website, I've got this blog, and the blog has been going on for about 20 years, basically every Tuesday and Thursday for 20 years. And I did take a break this year because there's a pandemic, in case you didn't know. I started in April of 2012. And then I have a podcast, and I would encourage you to check this podcast out if you are enjoying this talk. I've done 844 episodes. And I'm just going to scroll with my scrolly wheel here while I talk. And I want to point out that I'm not having trouble finding cool people to talk to. Isn't that funny? People say, I can't find anyone to speak at my conference. I can't find anyone to be on my podcast. I can't find anyone to hire. Gosh, I'm having no trouble finding amazing people. I'm still scrolling, by the way, and I'm only in the 700s. So I could just keep scrolling for the next 30 minutes, and you're going to notice that all these cool people look like the mall. Remember the mall? Remember when we could go to the mall? Everyone looks not like me, but they look like the people that you would bump into the mall. I'm still in the 500s, upper 500s. All these cool people. Now, I've been doing this for a very long time, 16 years on the podcast. And then sometimes people will say, well, hang on, Scott, you're saying you want us to work harder and blog twice a week and do a podcast. I have a job. I've got kids. This is the whole thing. I don't want to get up in your hustle culture. You know, hustle culture is not healthy. I'm not saying that the solution is for us to work harder and blog more. I'm saying that you can't just wake up and kick butt and repeat. And remote work is not quarantine work. We're all feeling pressured. I'm proposing that we think more intentionally and more consciously about how we interact with people, about how we spend our time, and the energy that we put out into the world. I don't want anyone to feel that pressure to overwork. The solution is not you working 9 to 5 and then blogging 6 to 10 and then putting the kids to bed and then keeping going until 2 in the morning. All of that is just going to stress you out, and then you're going to end up scrolling for doom, and doom scrolling never hurts anybody. In order to have a healthy, long career in technology, you need to be very deliberate. You need to be very intentional. And those terms have really meant a lot for me over the last 10 or 15 years. I've started really thinking about deliberate practice. People will say, how have you been in tech so long? How do you keep from getting burned out? How do you do the blog and the podcast and your job? I'm sure you feel the same way about some of your peers. You look at your other friends and some of the great speakers at the Umbraco conference, and you're like, I don't know how they do it. They keep pumping out great content. I can tell you that the way that they're doing it is by being intentional. What happens is that we don't wake up in the moment and think about how we spend our time, whether it's the right thing to be doing right now. We just are slapping little projects that come up. Oh, an email, oh, a text message. And then that's how you get burned out. The most powerful thing that we can do is slow down and think, is this what I need to be doing right now? And is this the way I need to be doing it? And if it's not, then you say no. No is the most powerful thing that you can do. The first thing that I started with was my space, where I'm sitting right now. Maybe our friends who are running the board can make me full screen right now for just a moment and make my slides just go away. Just for a second. I'm not sure if that's possible. So this is my area here. And my little room is, someone said it, they thought it was a Zoom background. Like, wouldn't that be cool? You could have a Zoom background of my office. But it's a real office. And I can touch real stuff, right? So I've got a real space here, and I've got all kinds of things that make me happy. I've got my crocheted Baby Yoda, and I've got my arcade games back here, and I've got my Raspberry Pis, got my Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster, and I've got my Ironheart, Iron Man action figures, and I got my Star Wars, and I got all my things that make me happy. Go ahead and put the slides back up. And the reason that I show you that is that I want you to think about your space and where you're working and make a nest. This room might look like $1,000,000. It's actually not $1,000,000. It's about $350, because what I've done with this room is I've painted it differently than the rest of my house, and I've lit it. I've lit it differently. It turns out that $50 worth of LED lights makes your room look like $1,000,000, which is kind of cool. And these shelves back here that you saw before when I was full screen, those are from IKEA. And there's a slip cover on that couch, and I've had that couch for 25 years. There's nothing special about this room other than it's my room. It has my shelves and my books and my Lego and the things that make me happy. And making a nest isn't random, it's intentional. When you sit down in your space and you look around on the desk, do the things that you have in your space inspire you? Do they make you happy? Do you have something that will allow you to create and be present in the moment? A lot of us during the pandemic started working remotely. I know a lot of you that side are back to normal, but some of us ended up on the kitchen counter, and some of us ended up just sitting on the couch. And then we wondered why we didn't feel good. Ah, this remote work sucks. I don't feel good. You had to make a space. We had one person at Microsoft end up in her pantry where she keeps the food in the kitchen, and I asked her why, and she's like, because I have a door and I can go into this little food room and close the door, and it's like a little like a phone booth almost. And I said, don't you feel claustrophobic in there? And she's like, no, it's like a hug. I'm in my little space here. And she's got her laptop and her little pantry, and she's got snacks within reach. And I was like, that's really cool. And it's important because she didn't just end up in the pantry. She decided to be in the pantry. She started to be intentional about where her space was, and then thought about, is this the time to create, to work? Right now it's 7 in the morning where I am. This is not my most optimal time. I'll just be honest with you. I'm not a morning person. However, if it were 2 or 3 in the morning, that would be the optimal time for me. That doesn't mean I would be getting up early. That means I would have to stay up really late. And then 3 in the morning would be super late. And then I'm like, ah, now I can code. Now I can code. Isn't that funny how just a couple of hours either direction? But yeah, I need to stay up for 20 or 30 hours and then I get my optimal code because I know that about myself. I know intentionally when my best time to create is. And I encourage you as you're moving through your tech careers to think about those things as well. And just a reminder that everyone is an expert at something. So if there's anyone here who wants to be a speaker at next year's event, or maybe doesn't know what to blog about and they've just been lurking, you're an expert in your experience with the technology that you appreciate and that you love. And I would encourage you to write about it. Now, here's the thing though. Let's say after this talk, some folks say, hey, Scott, great talk. I have a question, and they email me. Or they email me and they say, I'd like to pick your brain. That's the worst. I hate those emails. I want to pick your brain. Can I get a call? Can we have a Teams call? Just 30 minutes. I want to pick your brain. Maybe I have a question. You could write me an essay about the answers about how to get into tech. I don't know you. I'm not going to give you the gift of 2,500 of my keystrokes. What if you write me an email and I go and type for 20 minutes and it's an amazing essay, and then you say, thanks. Where do those keystrokes go? Those keystrokes are gone. I'm never getting those keystrokes back. But I want to be an inclusive person in tech. I want to share my knowledge, but I'm not going to email you. I don't know you. I'm not going to have lunch with you. I only have so much time. I've got a kid in high school. He's only going to be here for a couple more years, and then I'm never going to see him again, right? If he even talks to me, that would be amazing. So I have a finite number of keystrokes left in my hands before I die. It got really dark, didn't it, for a second there? This conference has suddenly got incredibly dark. I actually went and made a website called keysleft.com. That's how dark we're getting today. And I can see a couple of you. I'm going to say that this gentleman is a crisp 29 years old and types 80 words a minute. He has 281,087,000 keystrokes left before he dies, and the number is going down live on the stage as we sit here because he's not typing. He should probably get working. Now, this is assuming that you're going to spend half your day typing and that you have an average letter number of words. If you're writing in German, of course, you have a lot fewer words, depending on your language and how long the words are. But what this means is, are you going to spend time writing novels and love letters, or are you going to email your boss? Okay? Where are your keystrokes going to go? So let's go back to my original question. Someone decides to email me. That was a gift. They took the time out of their keystrokes and they emailed me a question, and that question itself was a gift. I don't want to ignore it, but I also can't give them all those keystrokes. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is that I answer, I write it, and I put it somewhere. I put it on an Umbraco site. I put it in a wiki. I put it in a SharePoint. Well, maybe not SharePoint, but I put it in anywhere with a URL. Okay, I put it anywhere with a URL, and then I send that URL to the person who emailed me. And then I go to sleep. And then 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people visit my site, and they Google it with Bing, and they find the website, and they see that. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I don't want to start a blog. No one's going to read it. If more than one person reads the blog, you've succeeded. You've doubled your keystrokes. Your blog works for you while you sleep. I have 1 million people read my blog while I sleep. I have people listen to my podcast. If you put this information out, if you share your experience, if you answer folks without emailing them, you just email them the link, you give all of your knowledge a link, and that link works for you while you sleep. And that's why it's so important to have CMSs in our lives, to have blogs and systems, because anything with a URL can be shared, and that sharing is a positive thing. Now, you might feel like you can't do this because you're not a professional. You haven't been in tech for 30 years. Well, we're all amateurs. There are no professionals. I actually have on my wall here. Let me see if I can actually change my camera. I have degrees that I put on the wall just to remind myself that I went to school and that I know what I'm talking about. And then I realized that everything that I learned in school is now dead. All the programming languages, operating systems, everything that they taught me means nothing. All it is that those papers prove that I stuck with it. So I realized then, well, then what do I have, right? Well, I'm like, well, I've got 20 years experience. I got 30 years experience. That's another tough one. You know, people will use that as a weapon sometimes. You like be talking about tech, and then suddenly they'll say, well, I got 20 years experience. You should listen to me. Do you? Do you have 20 years experience? Or is it the same year 20 times? Have you just been doing the same thing year after year after year? This one hurt me. This one hurt me. So I said at the beginning, I've been doing this for 30 years. I had to go back and think about each year, where I was, what company I was working at, where I was in life, whether I was focused on my family or my job or my health or whatever. And it turns out I don't have 30 years experience. It was a lie. Got about 23. For 7 years, on and off, I think I was kind of asleep, just kind of doing my job, didn't really learn anything that year. And that made me really think about, again, being intentional, being focused, being deliberate, and trying to be awake for as much of my job as I can. Sometimes you can just do the same thing, work on the same project, use the same language. So I try to mix things up. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, my family has been doing Taekwondo. And in doing Taekwondo, we've learned a lot about ourselves, and we became first Dan black belts in Taekwondo. And we thought this was going to be amazing. We're like, we're black belts. You can't do anything with us, right? We're going to just like, we're going to beat you up at any moment. Well, we're first Dan, which is the first level, and there's like 9+ levels, and our grandmaster is at 9th Dan, and he's also in his late 70s. And he was sure to remind us that when we got the black belt after 4.5 years of working very hard as a family, and we all had going at different speeds until we finally reached black belt as a team, and he says, now we can get started. Now we can get started. Like, I thought this was an achievement. I thought I could start beating people up on the streets now. And no, he's like, I've been doing this since like 1958. No, this is where it starts. Black belt, which you were thinking about for all those years as the end, is now the beginning. So I've thought about that. You know, you think you've got 30 years in tech, and then Kubernetes comes out, and now you have 0 years in Kubernetes. So yes, whatever you are trying to do, you need to stay humble. Now, I'm reminded of Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, and he's quite humble. And one of the things that I love about Tim Berners-Lee is you'll notice his job title. Everybody wants to be a senior web developer, don't they? But when the person who invented the web itself decided to not put senior in front of his name, then I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. I guess he could have put The. What if you get a business card from someone and they're like, oh, hello, Tim Berners-Lee. Oh, you're a web developer. Oh, no, I'm the web developer. That would be a flex. That would be amazing. But even Tim Berners-Lee knows that he's not too old to get good advice. He doesn't understand everything that he builds. He never thought it would turn out like this. So he has people who mentor him. You're never too old to get good advice. I have people who mentor me. So I am a mentee. It was really important to me when I started my mentorship journey that I did not want to become the kind of mentor that was where the mentorship relationship was a weekly lecture with an old person. Oh, I am an old person and I'm going to tell you really deep stuff oh, thank you for being old and telling me about the days of the technology. That's not how the mentorship relationship should be. You got to see eye to eye. You're going to get advice and they're going to share experiences. So if you've only got maybe 5 years in tech, I hope that you find someone who has less and mentor them. I hope that you find someone who has more experience than you and you mentor up. Make sure that you have mentors on both sides and share your experiences. Now, when we hear that word mentorship, this word gets used a lot. Like I said before, sometimes it's a weekly lecture. And that was a way that I mentored for a while where I felt like I was meeting people with less experience and I would tell them stuff and then I would pat myself on the back because I'm now a mentor and then I would leave. But then I realized that mentorship and sponsorship were very different things. Mentors are these mirrors that will help you define your dream and help you understand your strengths. But sponsors will create luck. They will spotlight you and they will tell people about your work and they will lift you up into new spaces. A sponsor could be someone like they said, hey, you should talk at Umbraco Cloud. Or, hey, there's someone who's working on a website. Maybe you should talk to this person. And just making that connection can be a way of sponsorship. There's, in fact, a spectrum of sponsorship from mentors who you can brainstorm with, people that you can strategize with about, I want to get this next promotion. Can we sit down and come up with a strategy for that? Could be a technical strategy, could be a social strategy. There are connectors who say, oh, this person, that person, you all should talk and hang out together. That'll be great. Arnold's working on that. Anna, you should talk to Arnold. You guys can hang out. This is going to be great. It could be an opportunity giver who says, oh, shoot, we've just had someone cancel. Could you do a lightning talk? And suddenly an opportunity appears. It could be an advocate. An advocate is a person who talks about you when you're not in the room. That's huge. Are they saying nice things about you? Are they speaking kindly of you when you're not in the room? Think about where you and your mentees fit in this spectrum and what kind of sponsor you want to be. Now, I mentioned before that sponsors and mentors can create luck. Let's go back and dig into that a little bit. This concept of creating luck is really, really interesting. To create luck means you have to understand what luck is. Now, luck is being prepared plus opportunity. You can be very, very prepared, but if no opportunities present themselves, then that's a problem and you're alone. And if you have all these great opportunities, but you're completely unprepared for them, that's a problem. Luck, we're like, oh man, that person's so lucky. Why does stuff keep happening to them? Sometimes you can fool yourself into thinking, well, I worked really hard and that's why. Okay, well, that gave you preparedness, but that just meant you were ready for the opportunities. You still needed those opportunities. Those opportunities mean showing up, knowing the right people, looking a certain way, and just being lucky. We've all had situations where we've gotten someone's business card or email or Snapchat on a bus or on the train, and then suddenly that turned into a job. If you weren't prepared, that would have just been a regular day. But because you were prepared, you said, wow, that opportunity happened. I'm so lucky. This hard work is finally paying off. So here's the question then. How do we create luck? So I've been in tech for 30 years and I work at Microsoft and I'm giving a speech at a conference right now. That's a lot of privileges. Wow, that's amazing. I can lend privileges. I can lend an unlimited amount of privilege. This privilege that I have, I'm never going to run out of. It's not like I have 3 privilege cards in my pocket and I can only, I've already given out 2 privilege cards today. I can't give you any more. Sorry, buddy. No, I'm, boop, boop, boop. I got privilege all day, baby. So I can go and create luck by retweeting stuff, by emailing things, by introducing people to other people. And in doing that, I'm making good energy that's going to come back and build people up. Do that for 20 or 30 years, blogging, podcasting, talking about stuff, interviewing people, mentoring people, sponsoring people, and maybe you will be a mid-level Microsoft blogger that no one's ever heard of, like me. No, seriously though, that idea of creating luck is incredibly powerful because why didn't you retweet that? Why didn't you forward that email? There's nothing, it doesn't cost you anything. I'm not doing it for money. We do it because we want to lift everyone up and we want everyone to be successful and positive. Now, the other thing about mentorship that's funny is that sometimes people think it needs to go on forever. You don't have to mentor someone forever. Imagine starting a mentorship relationship where you talk about the phases. All right, I'll be your mentor. What's our goal? What's our plan? Why are we having this mentorship relationship? Is it through a particular technical problem? Is it because you want to get promoted? What is it that we can do that would make this a two-way street and not a regularly scheduled lecture? And then when you break up, at the end of your mentorship, it's not a breakup. It's just moving on to the next thing. Well, I got the promotion. I moved to a new company. I don't think we need to have these weekly meetings anymore, and that's okay. This is a really good framework in which to think about how you operate in technology, the stories that you have, and how you want to go and share those stories with other people so that then you can then lift them up and allow them to have their own stories. So as we're getting towards the end of the chat here, I'm going to tell some of my stories. I like tech stories, and I want to tell you a few interesting tech stories that I use when I'm talking to mentors and mentees. And then maybe you can think about your own stories so that you can tell them maybe at a future conference. Now, my experience in tech has been a little bit random, and I have on my desk here a Swiss Army knife that is reminding me of the kind of technologist that I want to be. It turns out that I'm a funny little knife that isn't amazing at everything. This is the reason that the Swiss Army is the power that they are today, my friends, because this is a really bad pair of scissors. I mean, it'll cut paper, but let's just say that you're not taking out the bad guys with the Swiss Army scissors, but you can maybe cut a piece of string. This is really an analogy, a metaphor that works very nicely. I don't even know what this thing is for. I think it's a compass, but yeah, that took up a lot of space inside of that. This is probably information that I have in my head about Windows 95 that I need to delete. This is why this is a really big knife. It's okay to be a funny little knife, but the one thing the Swiss Army knife is good at is it's a good knife. So I use this as an analogy of what I call the T-shaped developer. You may have heard that term, the T-shaped developer. The shape of the letter T is very wide and very broad, and then it goes deep. So I've picked for me .NET and C# as the thing that I go deep on, but then broadly, I have a broad understanding of the web, of HTTP, about the fundamentals of networking. If you are not T-shaped, if you can't go deep in something, you're going to find yourself more challenged as you bump into problems. You don't want to skimp on the basics, even if you're going to be a funny little Swiss Army knife. And actually, make me big again for a second. I want to show one of my other little Swiss Army knife things. Push the little button there, sir, and make me big. So I keep these things on my desk. I have the Swiss Army knife, which is right here, but then I also have this little guy here. Let's see if we can see. He's thinking about making me big. He'll get it. This, look at that. You know who this is? That's Fabulous Batman. Fabulous Batman is Batman. He's a ballerina, he's a fairy, and he's a ninja. Who says you can't do whatever you want to do in tech? If that's not a the physical embodiment of a Swiss Army knife. I don't know what it is. So I have Fabulous Batman sitting on my desk to remind me that I can do whatever I want in tech, and I'm not going to fit into somebody's box. So just remember Fabulous Batman and the Swiss Army knife, and have stuff like that. What are the things on your desk that inspire you? Thank you for our AV people for being very generous. Go ahead and put me back the way I was before. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They're like, what's happening? Hanselman's telling me to switch. Good job. Very good job in our back office there. All right, let's talk about some things. I usually talk about technology in 4 major areas. There's problem solving, there's layering the problem, there's the composition of parts to make the problem, and then there's patterns. Talk about problem solving first. Problem solving is asking yes/no questions at scale. And the reason that a senior engineer can do better than a junior engineer or an early in career engineer is because they can take problems and they can cut them in half with a single question. They go, is it this? Yes? Okay. And then we solve that problem and we run in that direction. And you can go and yes, no your way all the way to the problem. So I was giving a talk recently for some kids in South Africa who are learning to code. I think they're in their late teens. And I decided, let's go and let's learn how to code, everybody. Let's debug a problem. And they're like, yeah, we're going to learn how to code. Woohoo. I said, all right, here we go. We're going to debug this problem. My toaster is broken. And I made it really awkward and I paused. Like, we're going to debug it. This is a problem. I got a problem. And they're like, I want to learn how to code. No. We need to get me toast first. And they're like, well, okay, fine. Buy a new toaster. Buy a new toaster? No, I'm not going to buy it. Like, that just means I could have 2 broken toasters at this point. You haven't debugged anything. And they're all right. Like, let's think about the system within which the toaster exists. What's preventing me from getting toast? And they're like, well, did you push the thing? Is the toast in all the way? They ask all the basic questions. And then somebody says, well, hang on, is the power on? Oh, okay. How would I check that? Well, I don't know, plug something else in. Now we're cooking with gas. This is great. I'll go and get another lamp and I'll plug it in where the toaster is. And it turns out the lamp doesn't turn on. All right, I plug the lamp in. There's no power at the outlet. Remember, these are kids. And then they're like, well, did you blow a fuse? My parents always go and they flip the fuse thing, the breaker. Well, okay, the breaker's fine. And then the big question is the power on at all? Is there any power in the house? Now, remember, these are teenagers. And they're thinking, and they're learning to think about learning how to code. And what I'm doing is I'm tricking them into thinking about systems. And then one young lady says, hang on, do the neighbors have power? What a great question. Is there a power outage in the whole neighborhood? We were asking a question about toast. I want hot bread. And now we're looking out the window to see if the neighbors have power. That is systems thinking. That's like debugging a website every day because it's going to be DNS. Whatever it is, it's probably DNS, right? These are the kind of things. Now, at this point, it's fallen off the wire, the rails rather, and they're like, well, maybe there were aliens and they've attacked, and then there's an EMP that's destroyed all electronics, and that's why you can't have toast. It was probably that there was a power outage. But this is the difference between early in career and later in career people, is that early in career folks Google a lot, hopefully with Bing. And later in career people will go and eliminate an entire class of problems just because they've seen it before. And that's super important. So I made a list just off the top of my head. I made a list of all the different things that I could check as an example if I were debugging a website. And I also wanted to include a quote from our famous American president, Abraham Lincoln, that it's always DNS. This list right here that I made is very basic and is not complete. But I wanted to see as an exercise how quickly I could come up with those questions. And then I realized that really is the thing a senior engineer can do, is ask those questions and eliminate those problems. And as I go and do that, I cut the problem in half. I bisect the problem. And what I want to do is I want my mentees and my early in career people to be able to debug those problems fast as well. Now, my kids made me add this one here. It's never twins. Sherlock Holmes is always trying to find out who killed somebody, right? And there's usually someone who's, maybe the lady has killed her husband, and like, oh, she's killed her husband. And then they, yeah, but we saw her on the other side of town. And then like, wait a second. If she was on this side of town and she was over there, how could she have killed the husband? And then Watson will say, Holmes, it was twins. And Sherlock Holmes says, no, it's never twins. Because there's certain problems, and it's just whatever it is, it's going to be much more clever than twins, right? These are the kind of things we want to think about when we're solving problems. And you learn that by sticking around and being in tech for a long period of time. Another class of things we talk about is layering. Layering is hiding complexity from yourself and from others, right? Umbraco's a layered system. You can think about APIs here, or you can work on the core. This is up to you, but layering is in fact lying. You're lying to yourself because you're hiding complexity. One of the good examples I like to use is what an email looks like. We've all sent an email. We see the UI for the email, but we don't usually look behind it at the text behind the email. This is the text behind email. Look at this. It's name value pairs from colon to colon. This is literally the text behind what email itself looks like. No one ever looks at that. You look at Outlook or you look at Gmail, but you never realize that email is just a hash table of text. Okay, why would I tell you that? Well, have you ever sent an HTML form? Have you ever filled out a form online and posted it? Look at that. It looks the same as an email. It's a hash table of text of name value pairs. So that means if someone asks me to work on a system that's going to manage email, and I have to do low-level work, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. I don't know this stuff. Maybe I already know it. I know about HTML. I know about HTTP. I know about ports. I can put these things together, and I realize that all these ideas have grown out of other ideas. Email, HTTP, it's all the same. You know this stuff already. Ideas get reused. The thing on the right, that is a record player from 150 years ago. Thing on the left, that's a hard drive. Circles with data encoded inside them with a head that picks it up. Same basic concepts and ideas. These are important things for us to remember. I also think sometimes about composition. I'll tell you this one last story and then I'll skip because I know we have to do the some Q&A here in a little bit. But composing things are important. Here's my favorite story. This is true. On Netflix, there's a show that is called Altered Carbon. And in Altered Carbon, there's a guy who is an AI. And the guy in Altered Carbon, who's the AI, is the hotel. So basically, the good guy, the protagonist of the show, is being chased by the bad guys. He runs into this hotel, and the hotel is a computer, and it's run by an AI. And the AI is taking the form of Edgar Allan Poe. And this actor here on the left, Chris Connor, plays Edgar Allan Poe. And he's amazing. He's the best part of the entire show. Now, he's not super famous. He's not like, Captain America over here, but he's a working actor. So I tweet him and I say, hey, you were amazing. This was great. You crushed it, because I'm a fan, right? And you get to talk to people on Twitter. So I say you're amazing. And he turns out he's in Portland. I'm in Portland. So you got to shoot your shot. So I said, hey, let's have tacos. And we hang out. We go and we freaking have tacos. And he shows up in a vest and an ascot or a scarf. I know that you're all European. We don't wear scarves and look good in America. This is not a thing. If you want to come to America and look amazing, like more than 99% of Americans, just wear a scarf. And this gentleman did it with a vest. This is amazing. To pull that off in the US, unreal. So super cool guy. We go and record a podcast, okay? And I bring my SD card and my recorder and we talk for 45 minutes and it's amazing. I am having a bromance with this person. I'm telling my wife I've met another man and we're gonna be spending time together and he's my new best friend. And then I go home with the SD card and I plug it into my computer and here's what I see. I see nothing. I see an infinite folder structure of blank folders with no name. I'm gonna die. What am I going to do? He's never going to talk to me again. We'll never have a second date. I'll just have to, stay married to my wife for another 20 years. I'm not going to be friends with this guy. He's an actor. He's going to hate me. No one's ever going to come on my podcast again. What am I going to do? I'm feeling super sad. And then I start digging around and I notice that the SD card thinks it has data. It thinks it has data. That's about the size of 45 minutes of audio, but I just can't see it inside of Explorer. So then I think to myself, well, I'm a programmer. I'm not an expert at SD cards and file systems, but I start reading because I know I can read. And remember what I said, everything is name value pairs. I just start reading about the file allocation table, the FAT allocation table, and I start noticing that there's things that don't look good. That number is not supposed to be 0. That should be this. That number is not supposed to be that. It should be this. And I dig and I dig and I dig for 18 hours, and I recover the podcast. And we're still friends, and we have lunch every couple of weeks, and he's a lovely, lovely gentleman, and he's got a new show on Showtime, and you should check it out. So why is this important for mentors? Telling stories like this remind people that nothing in the computer is hidden from you. Nothing in the computer is hidden from you. You may be working at the CMS level, or you may be working at the HTTP level. It doesn't matter. You can always go one layer below your comfort zone. You don't need to know it all. All that stuff that I did, saving that hard drive, I've forgotten it. I mean, it's in there somewhere, but it's not my specialty. I don't do that stuff. But I did it. I felt powerful, and I know that I could do it again. And that's what I want people to feel like when they are in tech. I'm going to jump to the end, and I'm going to say thank you so much for letting me spend time with you today. I hope this gave you a little bit of energy and a push towards the end of our show here. And I understand we're going to do some Q&A. Is that right, my friends?
Yep.
All right. I'm only about 4 minutes over, so I think